The red dust of Dust Creek clung to everything like a second skin, coating the ramshackle buildings and the souls of men who'd long since given up on redemption. Caleb Thorne sat hunched over a scarred wooden table in McGinty's saloon, nursing a glass of rot-gut whiskey he couldn't afford to refill. His calloused fingers traced the edge of his last silver dollar, the metal warm from being clutched in his palm for the better part of an hour. Arizona Territory, 1872. The war had been over for 7 years, but Caleb still carried it in the stoop of his shoulders and the hollowness behind his gray eyes. He'd come west like so many others, chasing gold and a fresh start. Finding neither, now, at 32, he was just another ghost haunting the borderlands, too stubborn to die and too tired to truly live. The saloon doors burst open, bringing with them a gust of desert wind and the stench of unwashed bodies. Harlan Pike strutted in like he owned the place, which, given the fear in the bartender's eyes, he might as well have. Pike was a trader of the worst sort, dealing in human misery with the same casual indifference most men reserved for cattle. Behind him, 2 of his men dragged someone through the sawdust. "Gentlemen," Pike's voice boomed across the saloon, silencing the few conversations that hadn't already died. "I've got myself a rare specimen today. Fresh from the Apache raids up north." The figure they hauled forward was small, bound at the wrists with a rough rope that had rubbed the skin raw. An Apache girl, no more than 20 summers by Caleb's reckoning, though it was hard to tell beneath the dirt and bruises. Her doe-skin dress was torn, revealing glimpses of copper skin marked by violence. But it was her eyes that made Caleb's breath catch dark as obsidian and burning with a fury that no amount of rope could contain. "This here's prime stock," Pike continued, yanking the girl's head back by her tangled black hair to display her face. Young, strong, and spirited enough to make breaking her interesting. What am I bid? The girl, Nayeli, Caleb would later learn, spat directly in Pike's face. The trader's backhand sent her sprawling, but she was back on her feet in an instant, blood trickling from her split lip as she glared at him with undiminished defiance. "Feisty little wildcat, ain't she?" Pike laughed, wiping spittle from his cheek. "That'll cost extra. Let's start the bidding at $20. "25, called out Josiah Briggs from the corner, his piggy eyes gleaming with an appetite that turned Caleb's stomach. 30, countered another voice. Caleb's fingers tightened around his silver dollar. He'd seen this play out before in a dozen frontier towns. The girl would be sold, used, discarded. Just another casualty of the endless wars between red and white. Another soul ground to dust beneath the wheel of manifest destiny. $40, Briggs shouted, already loosening his belt in anticipation. The girl's eyes swept the room, taking in the leering faces with a warrior's assessment. When her gaze met Caleb's, something passed between them, not hope, exactly, but recognition. Here was someone else who knew what it was to be reduced to nothing, to have everything stripped away until only the stubborn refusal to surrender remained. $50, and that's my final offer, Briggs declared, coins clinking as he counted them out on the bar. Pike grinned, gold teeth glinting in the lamplight. 50 going once, going twice. Wait. The word escaped Caleb's lips before he could stop it. Every head in the saloon turned to stare at the raggedy stranger in the corner. He stood slowly, his worn boots scraping against the floorboards. You got something to say, saddle tramp? Pike's hand drifted toward the navy colt at his hip. Caleb walked forward, each step measured and deliberate. He could feel the weight of dozens of eyes on him, could hear the whispers starting. Crazy, fool, dead man walking. I said, wait. He stopped directly in front of Pike, close enough to smell the tobacco and sweat. I'll buy her. Pike's laugh was like breaking glass. You, boy, you couldn't buy a cup of coffee in this establishment, let alone. Caleb placed his silver dollar on the bar. The coin spun once, twice, then settled with a soft clink that seemed to echo in the sudden silence. That's $1, Pike said slowly, as if explaining to a child. The bid is 50. That's my last dollar, Caleb replied, his voice steady despite the hammering of his heart. Everything I have in this world. Then you're either drunk or touched in the head. Maybe both. Caleb's eyes never left Pike's face. But I'm making the offer all the same. $1 for the girl. The tension in the room stretched taut as a bowstring. Someone coughed nervously. Briggs started to protest, but Pike silenced him with a gesture. You know what? The trader's smile widened, revealing more gold. I like you, stranger. Takes real sand to stand there with nothing but pocket lint and make demands. Tell you what, I'll make you a deal. Caleb waited, knowing whatever came next would likely end with him face down in the dirt. You want to throw away your last cent on this savage? Fine. But you take her as is no food, no water, no supplies. You walk out that door with her, and I wash my hands of both of you. Pike leaned in close, his breath hot and foul. Course, the moment you can't protect her, the moment you turn your back or close your eyes, she'll gut you like a rabbit and leave you for the buzzards. But hey, that's your problem, not mine. Deal. The word hung in the air like smoke. Pike blinked, clearly not expecting such ready acceptance. Around them, men shifted uneasily, hands moving toward hidden weapons. They could smell blood coming, inevitable as sunrise. Well, then, Pike snatched up the silver dollar, bit it to test its authenticity, then pocketed it with a shrug. She's all yours, friend. Try not to bleed on my floor when she opens your throat. He shoved the girl forward. She stumbled, but didn't fall, her bound hands making balance difficult. Caleb caught her elbow to steady her, feeling her flinch at the touch. Knife, he said quietly. What? I need a knife to cut her bonds. Pike's laughter filled the saloon. Oh, this is rich. You're gonna cut her loose here now. He pulled a bone-handled blade from his belt, offering it hilt first with mock courtesy. By all means, let's see how long you last. Caleb took the knife, testing its edge with his thumb. Sharp, good. He turned to the girl, seeing the confusion flickering behind her defiance. Moving slowly, telegraphing his intentions, he brought the blade to the rope at her wrists. Don't, he said softly, for her ears alone. Not here, not yet. The rope parted with a whisper. Her hands dropped to her sides, blood flowing back into her fingers. She rubbed her wrists, never taking her eyes off him. Caleb reversed the knife, offering it to her handle first. The saloon erupted. Men scrambled backward, chairs overturning, glasses shattering. Someone went for their gun, but stopped when the girl made no move to take the blade. What the hell are you doing? Pike demanded, giving her a choice. Caleb kept the knife extended, patient as stone. She can take it and try to kill me, like you said. Or she can take it for protection on the road, or she can leave it and walk away free. Her choice. The girl Nayeli studied him with those depthless eyes. Her hand moved toward the knife, hesitated, then continued. Fingers closed around the handle, and Caleb felt the room hold its breath. She took the knife, tested its weight, then, in one fluid motion, she slipped it into a concealed sheath in her dress. Smart girl, Caleb murmured. He turned to face the room, aware of how many hands rested on gun butts. We'll be leaving now. You're a damn fool. Pike called after them as they moved toward the door. She'll kill you before moonrise. Maybe. Caleb paused at the threshold, looking back at the trader. But that'll be her choice to make, not yours. They stepped out into the dying light of day, the desert sun painting Dust Creek in shades of blood and gold. The girl walked beside him, not behind, her stride matching his despite her smaller stature. Neither spoke as they made their way down the dusty main street, past the leering faces and whispered predictions of doom. At the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to scrub and stone, she finally broke the silence. Why? Her English was accented but clear. Caleb considered the question, watching the sun sink toward the mountains. Why indeed he thought of Isaiah, the boy he'd failed to save, of all the choices taken from him by war and circumstance, of the weight of that last silver dollar, now replaced by something far heavier and infinitely more precious. Because everyone deserves to choose their own path, he said at last, even if it leads to darkness. She said nothing more, but when they set off into the desert, she walked beside him still. Two figures against the vastness, carrying nothing but the clothes on their backs and the weight of a single choice. Behind them, Dust Creek faded into shadow. Just another ghost town waiting to be reclaimed by the sand. Ahead lay the desert, vast and unforgiving, where men and women were stripped down to their essential truths. Caleb Thorne had spent his last dollar. What he'd purchased remained to be seen. The desert night descended upon them like a burial shroud, bringing with it a bone-deep cold that seemed impossible after the day's scorching heat. They'd walked for hours in silence, putting distance between themselves and Dust Creek, following no particular trail save the one that led away from civilization's cruelties. Caleb's stomach had long since given up its protests. Hunger was an old companion, one he'd learned to ignore during the war. But the girl Nayeli, she moved with the liquid grace of someone who'd grown up in this unforgiving land, her bare feet finding purchase on stones that would have lamed a horse. When the moon rose, full and merciless, he finally called a halt in the lee of a massive boulder. The rock still held some of the day's warmth, a small mercy in the growing chill. "We'll rest here," he said, his voice rough from disuse and thirst. She regarded him with those dark eyes, unreadable as the night sky. Since leaving town, she'd maintained a careful distance close enough to suggest traveling together, far enough to run or fight if needed. The knife he'd given her remained hidden, but he could sense its presence, the way a man learns to feel the weight of weapons near him. Caleb shrugged off his worn jacket, the wool threadbare but better than nothing. He held it out to her, a gesture that seemed to surprise them both. "You'll freeze," she said, the words careful, measured. "I've been colder." He kept the jacket extended, patient. "Take it." She didn't move, studying him with an intensity that made him want to fidget like a schoolboy. "Finally," she spoke again, her voice carrying an edge sharp as flint. "You think this makes you good mankind, man?" "No," Caleb answered honestly. "Just a man trying to get through the night." Something shifted in her expression, not quite acceptance, but a lessening of the rigid tension that had held her since Dust Creek. She took the jacket, wrapping it around her shoulders without taking her eyes off him. Caleb settled against the rock, trying to find a position that didn't aggravate the old bullet wound in his hip. From his shirt pocket, he produced his last possession of value, half a strip of jerky, hard as leather and about as appetizing. He bit off a piece, chewed slowly, then offered the remainder to her. This time she didn't hesitate, taking the meat with a quick motion. They ate in silence, the jerky barely enough to wake their hunger, let alone satisfy it. "Water," she said when they'd finished. Not a question, a statement of need. "Don't have any." Caleb spread his empty hands. "Figured we'd find some come morning, or die trying." She finished the thought with a bitter smile. "You are fool. White man. You trade last dollar for death in desert." "Maybe." He tilted his head back, studying the stars. Been called worse. She shifted, the jacket rustling. When he glanced over, she'd drawn the knife, holding it loosely in her lap. The moonlight caught the blade, turning it to liquid silver. "I could kill you now," she said conversationally. "Take boots, maybe find way back to my people." "You could," Caleb agreed. He made no move to defend himself. Didn't even tense. Boots are about worn through, though. And if you knew where your people were, you'd already be walking. Her knuckles whitened on the knife handle. "You know nothing of my people." "I know enough." His voice was gentle, empty of judgment. I know Pike and his kind have been raiding the bands, selling whoever they can catch. I know the Army's been pushing the Apache harder every year, burning out the rancherias, scattering families to the wind. And you, the blade trembled slightly. You fought in white man's war. Maybe you killed Apache too. Never fought Apache. Caleb closed his eyes, memories crowding in unbidden. Fought other white men, mostly, boys in gray who looked just like boys in blue, bleeding the same color into the same mud. He heard her shift again, opened his eyes to find her staring at him with something like curiosity. Why you buy me? The question he'd been dreading. Caleb considered his words carefully, knowing that honesty might be the only currency that mattered here. There was a boy, he began slowly. Isaiah, contraband. They called him escaped slave who attached himself to my unit. Couldn't have been more than 14, but he lied about his age, said he wanted to fight for freedom. He paused, swallowing past the tightness in his throat. I was supposed to look after him. Colonel's orders. Keep him safe, he said. Boy could cook, tend wounds, had a smile that could light up the darkest night. The knife had lowered slightly, though her grip remained firm. Battle of Stones River. Caleb continued. Everything went to hell. Rebels broke our line, scattered us like leaves. In the chaos, I lost him. Found him 3 days later in a field hospital. Gut shot, held his hand while he died, promised I'd tell his mama he'd been brave. His voice turned bitter. Never found his mama. Don't even know if she survived the war. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant howl of a coyote. This does not answer question, she said finally. Doesn't it? Caleb met her gaze. I couldn't save Isaiah. Couldn't save a lot of people. But today, in that saloon, I could choose. Not to save you, that's not my place. But to give you the chance to save yourself. She considered this, head tilted like a bird studying something new and potentially dangerous. You are a strange man, Caleb Thorne. It was the first time she'd used his name. He'd mentioned it on the trail, but hadn't been sure she was listening. What do I call you? He asked. Your real name, not whatever Pike might have. Nayeli. She said it like a challenge, daring him to mangle the pronunciation. Nayeli, he repeated, trying to shape his mouth around the unfamiliar sounds. Close enough, judging by her slight nod. She studied him for another long moment, then did something unexpected. With deliberate movements, she reversed the knife, offering him the handle just as he'd done in the saloon. Your turn to choose, she said. Caleb looked at the offered blade, understanding the test. He could take it, restore the balance of power, make himself feel safer. Or, keep it, he said. You'll need it more than I will. She withdrew the knife slowly, something shifting in her expression. Not trust that would take far longer than a few hours, but perhaps the beginning of belief that he meant what he said. Sleep, she told him. I watch first. You can barely keep eyes open. Sleep, fool man. I wake you when moon sets. Caleb wanted to argue, but exhaustion was already pulling at him. He'd been running on fumes since before Dust Creek, and now that they'd stopped moving, his body was presenting the bill. If you're going to run, he mumbled, already sliding toward unconsciousness. Aim for the neck. It's quicker. He thought he heard her laugh, a sound like water over stones, but sleep claimed him before he could be sure. In his dreams, he was back at Stones River, searching through the smoke and screams for a boy who was already dead. But this time, when he found Isaiah, the boy had Nayeli's eyes dark and fierce and full of accusations he couldn't answer. He woke to a hand on his shoulder, gentle but insistent. The moon had traveled across the sky, painting new shadows on the desert floor. Nayeli crouched beside him, the jacket still draped around her shoulders. Your watch, she said simply. Caleb sat up, grimacing as his body protested the movement. She'd woken him as promised, hadn't run or tried to harm him. It was more than he'd had any right to expect. "Any trouble?" "Coyotes," she said, settling against the rock where he'd been. "But they smell no food here. Move on." He took up position a few feet away, close enough to respond to danger, but far enough to give her space. The desert stretched endlessly before him, a canvas of silver and shadow. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for not killing me." "Night is not over," she replied, but there was something almost like humor in her voice. They settled into their respective watches, two damaged souls finding an unexpected rhythm in their shared vigilance. As the stars wheeled overhead, Caleb found himself thinking that maybe, just maybe, his last dollar had purchased something neither of them had expected. A chance. Not for redemption, necessarily. He was too old and too tired to believe in such things, but perhaps for something simpler and more precious, the possibility of choosing a different path, of walking it with someone who understood the weight of survival. The desert wind whispered secrets in languages he didn't understand, and somewhere in the darkness, Nayeli began to hum a low, mournful melody that seemed to rise from the earth itself. Caleb closed his eyes and let the sound wash over him, a baptism of sorts in this church of stone and stars. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, finding water, food, avoiding those who would harm them. But tonight, they were simply two people who had chosen to trust, however, tentatively, in the middle of a vast and unforgiving nowhere. It was enough. For now, it was enough. The canyon known as Wolf's Howl earned its name honestly. When the wind funneled through its narrow passages, it created an eerie wailing that raised the hair on the back of Caleb's neck. They'd been following Nayeli's lead for 2 days now, she knowing the hidden springs and secret paths that kept them alive in the unforgiving desert. "Through here," she said, pointing to what looked like a solid wall of red rock. Caleb squinted, then saw it a narrow crack, barely wide enough for a man to squeeze through sideways. The morning sun hadn't yet penetrated its depths, leaving the passage shrouded in shadow. "You sure about this?" She gave him a look that suggested his intelligence was in question. "You want to go around, take 3 days, maybe meet soldiers." He didn't. They'd already had one close call with an army patrol yesterday, bellies in the dirt while horses thundered past. The soldiers were looking for Apache raiders, and they wouldn't stop to ask questions if they found a white man traveling with an Apache woman. "After you," he said, gesturing to the crack. She slipped through easily, her slight frame navigating the tight space with practiced ease. Caleb followed, sucking in his breath as the rock scraped against his chest and back. For one panicked moment, he thought he might get stuck, but then he was through, stumbling into a wider passage beyond. The canyon opened up before them, walls rising 100 feet on either side, carved by wind and ancient waters into fantastic shapes. But it was the 3 men waiting at the first bend that made Caleb's blood run cold. Well. The speaker was tall and lean, with the predatory grace of a man who made his living off others' misfortune. "Look what wandered into our web. Bounty hunters." Caleb recognized the type too lazy for honest work, too mean for anything but violence. The speaker wore his guns low, tied down gunfighter style. His companions flanked him, one fat and sweating despite the morning cool, the other young and twitchy with barely contained violence. "Morning, gentlemen," Caleb said, keeping his voice steady while calculating distances, angles, chances. His old Remington sat heavy on his hip, but these men had the drop on them. "That's far enough." The leader's eyes fixed on Nayeli. "That there's Apache stock, worth good money at Fort Buchanan. They pay for information about raiders." "She's with me," Caleb said. "Not anymore, she ain't." The fat one grinned, revealing teeth like broken tombstones. "See, we've been tracking you two since Dust Creek. Harlan Pike. He mentioned you might be heading this way. Said there might be a reward for returning his property." "I'm nobody's property." Nayeli spoke for the first time, her voice cutting like a blade. The young one laughed, high and nervous. Listen to her, trying to talk like white folks. Bet she'll sing different when we... That's enough. Caleb stepped slightly forward, putting himself between Nayeli and the men. We don't want trouble. Let us pass. And everyone goes home breathing. The leader, Caleb, decided to think of him as Hawk, for his sharp features drew his pistol with lazy confidence. See, that's where you're wrong, friend. You don't get to want anything. Way I figure it, you're either the dumbest man in the territory or you got something wrong in the head. Traveling with Apache trash. Either way, world's better off without you. Jake, we supposed to take her alive, the fat one protested. Shut up, Dewey. Jake kept his gun trained on Caleb. Pike said alive if possible. If not, he shrugged. Accidents happen in these canyons. Now, girl, you step away from him nice and slow. Nayeli didn't move. Caleb could feel her tension, coiled like a spring. He kept his hands visible, away from his gun, buying time. Funny thing about these canyons, Caleb said conversationally. Sound does strange things. That gunshot's going to echo for miles. Bring every Apache warrior in 50 miles running. Nice try. But Jake's eyes flickered uncertainty. Ain't no Apache around here. No, Caleb smiled without humor. You think she was traveling alone when Pike caught her? Think her people aren't looking for her right now? The young one, Billy, Dewey had called him, shifted nervously. Jake, maybe we should... Quiet. Jake's gun hand had developed a slight tremor. Nobody's coming. We take the girl, put a bullet in this fool, and ride out rich. The way Pike tells it. Caleb continued, voice calm as discussing weather. Her father was Ten Crow, war chief of the Mescalero. You really want his warriors finding your corpse? It was a bluff, built on fragments Nayeli had shared during their night walks. But fear was a powerful thing, and these men had grown up on stories of Apache vengeance. He's lying, Jake said, but sweat beaded on his forehead. That's when Nayeli moved. She'd palmed a stone sometime during the conversation, and now she whipped it with devastating accuracy. It caught Billy in the temple, dropping him like a felled tree. In the same motion, she dove right while Caleb went left, his Remington clearing leather as Jake's first shot split the air where they'd been standing. The canyon erupted in thunder and smoke. Caleb fired from a crouch, his bullet catching Jake in the shoulder, spinning him around. Dewey, panicking, sprayed shots wildly, rock chips flying as bullets sparked off canyon walls. Nayeli had found Billy's dropped rifle, and she worked the lever with practiced ease. Her shot was clean, deliberate. Dewey's gun flew from his hand along with 2 fingers. He screamed, clutching his maimed hand, falling to his knees. Jake, wounded but not out, tried to level his pistol with his good arm. Caleb's second shot discouraged that notion, the bullet kicking up dirt inches from Jake's face. Enough, Caleb shouted over the ringing in his ears. It's done. For a moment, violence teetered on the edge of further violence. Then Jake let his gun fall, clutching his bleeding shoulder. Billy was stirring, groaning. Dewey just knelt in the dirt, cradling his ruined hand and weeping. You should kill them, Nayeli said matter-of-factly. She kept the rifle trained on Jake. They will follow. Tell others. Caleb knew she was right. It was the smart play, the safe play. But he looked at these men broken, bleeding, afraid, and saw too many other faces. Boys in blue and gray, dying for causes they barely understood. No. He collected their weapons, tossing them into a crevice. Get up, all of you. You're making a mistake, Jake gasped through gritted teeth. We'll find you again. Maybe. Caleb helped Billy to his feet. The young man swaying drunkenly from the blow to his head. But not today, and not here. He turned to Dewey. Wrap that hand tight, or you'll bleed out before you reach help. There's a town called Dos Rios, 2 days east. They've got a doctor." "Why?" Jake stared at him, genuinely puzzled. "Why let us live?" Caleb glanced at Nayeli, who watched him with those dark, unreadable eyes. "Because she's teaching me about freedom," he said finally. "And free men get to choose mercy." They left the bounty hunters there, wounded and weaponless, and continued deeper into the canyon. Neither spoke until they'd put several miles between them and the ambush site. "You are fool," Nayeli said finally. But there was something different in her tone. Not quite approval, but a reassessment. "Been told that before." Caleb checked his Remington, reloading the spent chambers. "You handled yourself well back there. That stone throw, where'd you learn that?" Apache children learn many things. She'd kept Billy's rifle, carrying it with easy familiarity. Learn to hunt before walk. Learn to fight before talk. Useful skills out here. She stopped walking, turning to face him fully. "Why you not kill them truth this time?" Caleb met her gaze, seeing in it the echo of every hard choice he'd ever made. "I've killed enough men to know it doesn't solve anything. Just makes more corpses, more hatred, more blood calling for blood." He paused, struggling to find the right words. "Maybe I let them live because I'm tired of death, or maybe because I wanted you to see that there's another way." "Your way gets you killed," she said bluntly. "Maybe, but it's my choice to make." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Choice," she repeated, as if tasting the word. "Yes, this I understand." They resumed walking, the canyon gradually widening as the sun climbed higher. Caleb noticed Nayeli moving differently, now still alert, still cautious, but no longer maintaining that careful distance between them. When they stopped to rest in the shade of an overhang, she sat beside him instead of across from him. "Tell me about 10 Crow," he said. "Your father—" Her face closed off immediately, pain flickering behind her stoic mask. "Dead, like all brave men who stand against white soldiers." "I'm sorry." "Sorry changes nothing." But after a moment, she continued. "He was great man. Not just warrior, teacher. He said Apache must learn new ways or die with old ways. Some called him weak for this. He called them fools." "Sounds like a wise man." "Wisdom not stop bullets." Her voice turned bitter. "They came at dawn. Soldiers, scouts, men like Pike. Father fought so others could run. I saw him fall, wanted to go back, but Mother—" She trailed off, lost in memory. "Where's your mother now?" "Dead. Sickness took her last winter. I was trying to find Mother's people when Pike found me." They sat in companionable silence, two orphans of different wars finding common ground in their losses. Caleb thought about the strange twists of fate that had brought them together his last dollar, her fierce spirit, choices made in moments that changed everything. "Those men," Nayeli said suddenly. "They will tell others, make things harder." "Probably," Caleb admitted. "But that's tomorrow's problem. Today, we're alive, we're free, and we've got at least one rifle more than we had this morning." She almost smiled at that. "You strange man, Caleb Thorne, but maybe not fool." High praise indeed. This time she did smile, quick and bright as lightning. It transformed her face, revealing the young woman beneath the warrior's mask. Then it was gone, replaced by her usual watchful expression. But Caleb felt something ease in his chest. They'd survived their first real test, fought side by side, and chosen mercy over murder. As they prepared to move deeper into the canyon, following some internal map Nayeli carried, Caleb realized that his last dollar had purchased more than either of them had imagined. Not ownership, not obligation, but partnership forged in gunfire and tempered by choice. The sun climbed toward its zenith, and they walked on together. Two unlikely allies in a land that wanted them dead. Behind them, the canyon slowly swallowed the evidence of violence, leaving only the eternal wind to sing through Wolf's howl, carrying tales of mercy and bullets, freedom and the price men pay for both. The fire crackled between them, casting dancing shadows on the canyon walls. They'd found shelter in a natural alcove, protected on 3 sides by towering red rock. Caleb sat propped against his saddle taken from one of the bounty hunter's horses they'd found wandering after the fight, his shirt hanging open to reveal the makeshift bandage around his ribs. "Stop moving," Nayeli commanded, her hand surprisingly gentle as she cleaned the gash where a bullet had grazed him. He hadn't even realized he'd been hit until the adrenaline wore off. "It's nothing," he protested, then hissed as she applied the poultice she'd made from desert plants. "Nothing can kill you out here." She wrapped clean strips torn from her underskirt around his ribs, her touch clinical but careful. "Infection, fever. I have seen strong men die from nothing." The firelight caught the planes of her face, softening the harsh lines that survival had etched there. Up close, Caleb could see the faint scars on her arms, each one a story of endurance. Her hands, though calloused, moved with a healer's precision. "Where'd you learn this?" "My grandmother. She was a medicine woman before soldiers came." Nayeli tied off the bandage, sitting back on her heels. "She said healing and hurting are 2 sides of same blade. Must know both to survive." "Smart woman." "Dead woman." The words were flat, matter-of-fact, but Caleb caught the flash of pain in her eyes. She moved to tend the fire, adding dried mesquite that burned slow and steady. The smoke was minimal, nearly invisible against the night sky, another skill that spoke of a lifetime spent evading enemies. "Your turn," Caleb said quietly. She looked at him sharply. "What?" "To share. I told you about Isaiah. You tell me something. Fair's fair." Nayeli considered this, poking at the fire with a stick. For a moment, he thought she'd refuse. Then she spoke, her voice low and measured. "I had little brother, Samuel." Samuel. The Christian name surprised him. Mission name. His real name was Shining River, for the way light danced in his eyes. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. He was different, special, born with twisted foot. Could not run like other boys, but his mind sharp like obsidian. He remembered every story, every song. Said one day he would write them all down. Save them forever. Caleb remained silent, sensing the weight of what was coming. "When soldiers came, Mother told me to take him, run for the canyon. But he was slow. The foot. I carried him far as I could. We hid in cave, like rabbits. Could hear shots. Screaming. Smell smoke from burning." Her knuckles whitened around the stick. "Samuel, he wanted to go back. Said Father needed us. I held him down. Hand over his mouth to keep him quiet. Held him until the sound stopped." The fire popped, sending sparks spiraling upward. "When we came out, everything gone. Found Mother by the river, Father in the camp. Samuel, he never spoke again, not one word. The stories, the songs all locked inside." She threw the stick into the fire with sudden violence. 3 moons later, the silence took him. Just stopped eating, stopped drinking, died looking at me like I had killed him myself. "You saved his life," Caleb said softly. "For what to die slowly instead of quick?" She turned to face him, eyes bright with unshed tears. "This is what your mercy brings. Caleb Thorne. Sometimes death is kindness." He wanted to argue, to offer comfort. But what words could touch such grief instead? He pulled out the last of their whiskey, another gift from the bounty hunter's saddlebags, and offered it to her. She took a sip, coughed, then took another. "Your turn again," she said, handing it back. "Tell me why you walk like the man carrying mountain." Caleb took his own drink, feeling the burn all the way down. "Fair enough." He stared into the fire, gathering his thoughts. Antietam, September 17th, 1862. Bloodiest day in the whole damn war. My unit was ordered to take a cornfield. Simple enough. Except the Rebs had artillery zeroed in on it. We went in anyway. He paused, the memories threatening to overwhelm him. Made it halfway before the canister shot started. You know what that does to a man, turns him into mist. Pink mist and screaming. My sergeant, man named Collins, good man with a wife and 3 daughters, I watched him disappear, just gone. Nothing left but his boots. Nayeli moved closer, not touching but present. I broke, turned and ran. Left my unit, my friends. Left them all to die in that cornfield. Hid in a ditch until the shooting stopped. When I finally crawled out, found my best friend, Thomas, gut shot and calling for his mother. Held his hand while he died, him looking at me like he knew I'd run. You lived, Nayeli said simply. This is not shame. 63 men went into that cornfield. 8 came out, and one of them was a coward. The whiskey bottle trembled in his hand. They gave me a medal for rallying the troops under fire. Nobody saw me run. See, they just saw me come back, assumed I'd been fighting. I've been carrying that lie ever since. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the fire's whisper and the distant call of an owl. Do you think I judge you? Nayeli asked finally. Think I look at you and see coward? Don't you? She was quiet for a long moment. Then, deliberately, she moved to sit beside him, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her through the cool night air. I see man who knows what fear is, who carries ghosts, but still chooses to stand between me and those men today. I see someone who gives last dollar not to own, but to free. She paused, then added quietly, I see someone who might understand. Understand what die? The weight, the carrying, the way dead ones watch everything we do. She leaned back against the rock wall, shoulder almost touching his. Apache believe the dead walk with us. Not ghosts, memories. They judge, yes, but also guide. Your Thomas, my Samuel, they are here now. In this fire, in our words. That's actually comforting, Caleb admitted, surprised to find it true. My grandmother said the dead only leave when we stop carrying them. But some weights, she shrugged, some weights become part of us, like scars. They passed the whiskey back and forth, not drinking much but sharing the ritual of it. The night deepened around them, stars wheeling overhead in patterns older than human grief. Can I tell you something? Caleb asked eventually. Something I've never told anyone? She nodded. Sometimes, in that cornfield, in my nightmares, I don't run. I stand and fight and die with them. And when I wake up, for just a moment, I'm disappointed to still be breathing. Nayeli was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't respond. Then she reached over and took his hand, not romantically, but with the firm grip of one survivor to another. The disappointment, she said slowly, means you are a good man. Bad men feel only relief. They sat that way for a while, hands clasped, sharing warmth against the desert cold. It wasn't attraction, not yet, but something deeper. Recognition, understanding. The beginning of trust between two people who'd forgotten what trust felt like. We should sleep, Nayeli said finally, releasing his hand. Tomorrow we reach the trading post at Juniper Springs. Need supplies. Together, Caleb asked. That could be dangerous for you. Everything is dangerous, but you need proper bandages. And I need bullets for this rifle. She paused, then added with dry humor. Besides, you would die without me. Probably walk into cactus. Probably true, he admitted, surprising them both with a laugh. They arranged their bedrolls on opposite sides of the fire, maintaining some proprieties despite their growing connection. As Caleb settled in, ribs aching despite Nayeli's ministrations, she spoke once more. Caleb Thorne. Yeah. Thank you for listening, for understanding. Same to you, Nayeli. He thought she might say more, but silence reclaimed the night. Still, as sleep took him, Caleb felt something had shifted between them. The walls were still there, too much pain on both sides to drop them entirely, but windows had opened. Small ones, letting in just enough light to see that maybe, possibly, they didn't have to carry their ghosts alone. The fire burned low, casting longer shadows as the night wore on. Somewhere in the darkness, a wolf howled lonely sound for lonely creatures, but in their small circle of warmth and light, two broken people had found a moment of peace, and perhaps the beginning of something that might, given time and trust, grow into healing. Neither of them believed in miracles anymore, but as the stars continued their eternal dance above the canyon walls, they were learning that sometimes the smallest graces were enough: a shared bottle, a listening ear, a hand reaching across the darkness to say, "I see you. I understand. You are not alone." The smoke from the Apache camp rose in thin columns against the morning sky, barely visible unless you knew where to look. Nayeli had grown increasingly tense as they approached, her knuckles white on the rifle stock. Now, standing at the edge of a natural bowl in the mountains where the Hidden Ashes band had made their temporary home, she seemed to shrink into herself. "Maybe this was mistake," she said quietly. Caleb studied the camp below, perhaps 30 wickiups arranged in a defensive pattern, cook fires smoking, children playing despite everything their people had endured. "Your mother's people, you said..." "Her sister married into this band, but I have not seen them since." She trailed off, then straightened her spine. "Come, better to face whatever comes than stand here like frightened deer." They descended the narrow trail, and within moments, sentries materialized from the rocks like ghosts, warriors with rifles trained on them, faces painted for war, eyes hard as flint. One of them, a young man with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, stepped forward. "You bring White Eye here?" He spoke in Apache, but Caleb caught the tone if not the words. Nayeli responded in the same language, her voice steady despite the guns pointed at them. The exchange grew heated, gestures sharp, until an older woman emerged from the largest wickiup. "Enough," she commanded in English, clearly for Caleb's benefit. Her hair was gray-streaked, face weathered but regal. "You are Ten Crow's daughter." "I am Aunt Delche," Nayeli replied, using the English words. The woman Delche studied her with eyes that missed nothing, then turned that penetrating gaze on Caleb. "And this one, you bring enemy to our fires." "He is..." Nayeli paused, searching for words. "He bought my freedom from slavers, gave me weapon, fought beside me against those who would capture me." "Bought," the scar-faced warrior spat. "So he owns you." "No one owns me." Nayeli's voice turned sharp. "He spent last coin to free me, asks nothing in return." Delche circled them slowly, like a wolf evaluating prey. "Why would white man do this?" "Because it was right," Caleb said simply. Several warriors laughed, but there was no humor in it. Delche silenced them with a gesture. "Right." She stopped directly in front of him. "Your people burn our crops, poison our water, steal our children for your schools. What does white man know of right?" "Not enough," Caleb admitted. "But I know wrong when I see it, and leaving her in that saloon would have been wrong." Pretty words. A new voice, deep and commanding. The crowd parted for a man who could only be the chief Taki. Nayeli had mentioned him during their journey. He was younger than Caleb expected, perhaps 40, but his presence filled the space like smoke. Words are wind, actions speak truth. He said something in Apache to Nayeli, who stiffened. The exchange that followed was rapid, heated. Caleb caught his name several times, saw the way hands moved toward weapons. "What's happening?" he asked quietly. Nayeli's jaw was tight. "He says I endanger the band by bringing you here. Says I must prove my loyalty."
How?
She didn't answer immediately. Taki spoke again, his words falling like stones into still water. The gathered Apache moved back, forming a rough circle. Someone tossed a knife into the dirt at Nayeli's feet, not the one Caleb had given her, but a traditional blade with a bone handle.
He says,
Nayeli's voice was barely above a whisper,
says I must choose. Kill the white eye. Prove I am still Apache, or be cast out forever. No longer daughter of the people.
The camp fell silent except for the crackle of fires and the distant cry of a hawk. Caleb felt the weight of dozens of eyes, saw the mixture of hate and hope and hunger for vengeance in their faces. These people had lost everything: lands, loved ones, their very way of life. His death would be a small payment on an enormous debt. "Well," he said quietly, "I suppose that knife in the neck would be quicker after all." Nayeli picked up the blade, testing its weight. She looked at him, and in her eyes he saw the war between past and present, between the girl who'd grown up in these traditions and the woman who'd spent days learning to trust a stranger.
"Kneel," she said.
Caleb dropped to his knees without hesitation, never breaking eye contact. Around them, the Apache pressed closer, anticipation thick as smoke. He saw one woman clutch a child to her chest, turning the boy's face away from what was coming. Nayeli moved behind him, and he felt the cold press of steel against his throat. Her free hand rested on his shoulder, whether to steady herself or offer comfort. He couldn't tell.
"You trust too easy, white man,"
she whispered, so low only he could hear. "No," he whispered back. "I trust just enough." The blade pressed harder, and he felt the sting of it breaking skin, a trickle of warmth down his neck. The crowd held its breath. Taki watched with eyes like dark stones, unreadable and ancient. Then Nayeli spoke, her voice carrying clearly across the camp. First in Apache, then in English. "This man does not kneel because he is weak. He kneels because he is strong enough to trust. He gave me freedom when he could have taken it. He stood between me and men who would hurt me when he could have walked away. He carries scars from fighting his own people over slavery." She pulled the knife away from his throat, letting it fall to the ground with a dull thud. "I will not kill a good man to prove I am Apache. Being Apache means protecting those who protect us, honoring those who act with honor. My father, Ten Crow, taught this. He said the future comes whether we face it or hide from it. This man," she helped Caleb to his feet, "he is part of my future. I will not cut that future's throat to satisfy the past." The silence that followed was deafening. Taki's face remained stone, but something flickered in his eyes, surprised respect. He spoke again, sharp words that made several warriors raise their weapons. "Then you choose exile," Delche translated unnecessarily. "I choose my own path," Nayeli corrected, "as is my right as daughter of Ten Crow." "Your father is dead," Taki said in accented English. "His ways died with him." "Did they?" Nayeli stepped forward, and Caleb was amazed at the steel in her spine, the quiet authority in her bearing. "Look around you, uncle. How many warriors remain? How many children we hide in these mountains like rabbits while the world changes around us? My father saw this coming. He said we must adapt or vanish like snow in summer." "Adapt," the scar-faced warrior laughed bitterly. "You mean surrender? Become tame Indians begging for scraps?" "I mean survive," Nayeli shot back. "This man, yes, he is white, but he sees me as person, not savage or property. There are others like him, few but growing. We can work with such people or we can die proud and alone. Which would you choose for your children?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Caleb saw parents exchanging glances, saw the weight of impossible choices on weathered faces. Taki studied them both for a long moment. Then he spoke, his words measured and heavy. "You say this white eye is different. Words are wind. Let him prove it." "How?" Caleb asked, stepping forward. The chief's smile was sharp as winter. "Stay. 3 days. Live as we live.
Work as we work. Let the people see what kind of man pays his last coin for Apache freedom. Then we decide if you are friend or just another lying white-eye. And Nayeli, she has made her choice. She stands between worlds now, not fully Apache, not white. This has always been her path. Perhaps her father saw it, even if she did not. He paused, then added grudgingly, 10 Crow was my friend. I honor his daughter's courage, even if I question her wisdom. The crowd began to disperse, the immediate drama over, but tension lingering like heat after lightning. Delche approached them, her expression softer now. Come, she said. You both need food. Rest. The next days will not be easy. As she led them toward her wickiup, Nayeli touched the small cut on Caleb's neck. You did not flinch, she said quietly. You needed me to trust you, he replied. So I did. She looked at him with something new in her eyes, not just respect or gratitude, but a deeper recognition. No one has ever... I know, he said gently. Same for me. They followed Delche through the camp, feeling the weight of watching eyes. Some hostile, some curious, all waiting to see if the white man who'd spent his last dollar on an Apache woman's freedom was truly different, or just another disappointment in a long line of broken promises. 3 days to prove himself, 3 days to show that trust could flow both ways, that change was possible, that sometimes the bridge between worlds was built one person at a time. Caleb touched the cut on his neck, feeling the sting of it. Such a small wound compared to all the others he carried, but somehow, this one felt different. This one felt like a beginning. The fire burned low in Delche's wickiup, casting amber light through the dwelling as shadows danced on the hide walls. 3 days had passed since Taki's challenge. 3 days of Caleb working alongside the Apache men, learning their ways, earning grudging respect through sweat and silence. Now, on this last night, the camp was quiet except for distant drumming from the ceremony circle. Nayeli sat across from him, knees drawn up, her face half in shadow. They'd barely been alone since arriving, always watched, always judged. But tonight, Delche had gone to the ceremony, leaving them with knowing looks and herbs burning in a clay bowl that made the air sweet and heavy. Tomorrow they decide, Nayeli said softly, her voice different in the intimate space. Whether you have proven yourself. Have I? Caleb asked, flexing his blistered hands. He'd helped build shelters, hunt game, haul water whatever was asked, without complaint. To some others, she shrugged. Some wounds run too deep for 3 days to heal. I'm not trying to heal their wounds, just show I'm not here to cause more. She studied him in the firelight, and he became acutely aware of how close they were, how the dancing flames caught the copper tones in her skin, the way her hair fell loose around her shoulders instead of in its usual tight braid. You are a strange man, Caleb Thorne, she said, echoing her words from days past. You work like Apache, eat our food without complaint, sleep on ground. Why? Because you're worth it, he said simply, then felt heat rise in his face. I mean, earning their trust, being here, it's worth it. A smile ghosted across her lips. Smooth words for soldier. Never claimed to be smooth. He shifted, accidentally moving closer. Just honest. The drumming outside intensified, voices rising in ancient songs. The herbs in the bowl released another wave of fragrance, making the air shimmer like heat waves off desert stone. Nayeli moved then, unfolding her legs and settling beside him instead of across, their shoulders nearly touching. In 3 days, you've done more to understand my people than most whites do in lifetime, she said. But understanding and belonging are different things. I'm not trying to belong, just to be allowed to stay close. Close to the band. Close to you. The words hung between them like prayer smoke. Nayeli turned to face him fully, and he could see the flutter of pulse at her throat, the way her breath had quickened. You should not say such things, she whispered, but she didn't move away. Why not? Because I am caught between worlds. Because you deserve woman who can give whole heart, not one divided. Her hand moved to rest on the ground between them, fingers spread like a star. Because we both carry too many ghosts. Caleb covered her hand with his, feeling the calluses that matched his own. Maybe that's why we understand each other. Maybe broken people can build something whole together. She looked at their joined hands, then up at his face. In her eyes, he saw the same hunger he felt, not just for touch, though that was there too, but for connection, for someone who could see past the scars to the person beneath. The others, they would not understand, she said, but her fingers intertwined with his. Then the others don't need to know. Not tonight. The firelight painted her face in gold and shadow as she leaned closer. You know what you risk if they find us. I've risked everything for you since that day in Dust Creek. Why stop now? She made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob, then brought her free hand to his face, fingers tracing the line of his jaw. All my life, men have wanted to own me, possess me. You are first to simply want me. Not simply, he corrected, covering her hand with his. Completely. The distance between them vanished like morning mist. Her lips were soft against his, tasting of mesquite tea and something wild. For a moment they were tentative, careful. Then the dam broke. Months of loneliness. Years of carrying burdens alone. All of it poured into that kiss. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard. Nayeli's eyes were bright with unshed tears. We should not. Tell me to leave and I will, Caleb said, though it would kill him to do it. Your choice. Always your choice. She studied his face like she was memorizing it. Then, deliberately, she reached up and began unlacing her dress. Stay, she whispered. Choose to stay. What followed was not the rough claiming he'd witnessed too often in frontier towns, but something infinitely more precious. They came together like two rivers meeting slowly at first, learning the landscape of each other's pain and pleasure. Every touch was a question, every response an answer. Yes, here, yes, like this. Yes, we are alive despite everything that tried to kill us. In the firelight, their scars told stories. The bullet wound on his hip, the lash marks on her back, the knife scar on his shoulder, the burn on her thigh. They traced each other's history with gentle fingers and softer lips, reclaiming skin that had known too much violence. When she moved above him, hair falling like a curtain around their faces, Caleb thought he'd never seen anything more beautiful. Not pristine beauty that had been burned out of both of them long ago, but something better, strength and survival, and the choice to be vulnerable despite everything. See me, she whispered against his mouth. Not Apache girl, not rescued prisoner, just Nayeli. I see you, he breathed back. I've seen you since that first moment. They moved together with increasing urgency, the world narrowing to just this skin and breath and the ancient rhythm that promised life in the face of death. When release claimed them, it was with quiet gasps and tightening grips, each anchoring the other through the storm. Afterwards, they lay entwined on the buffalo robes, sweat cooling on their skin. Nayeli traced lazy patterns on his chest while he played with strands of her hair. The drums outside had quieted, the ceremony winding down. This changes things, she said eventually. Everything changes things. That's what living is. She propped herself up on an elbow to look at him. Tomorrow, when they decide, whatever they decide, we'll face it together. If they cast us out, we'll find another way. If they accept us, we'll build something here. Either way, I'm not going anywhere without you. Promise. With everything I have left. She kissed him again, slower this time, sealing the vow. When Delche returned later, she found them dressed and sitting respectably apart. But the knowing look in her eyes suggested she wasn't fooled. The council will meet at dawn. The older woman said simply, be ready. That night, Caleb lay on his separate blankets, hyper-aware of Nayeli's presence just feet away. His body still hummed with the memory of her. His mind replayed every touch, every whispered word. Whatever tomorrow brought, tonight had changed the fundamental truth of their connection. They were no longer just traveling companions or allies of convenience. They were choosing each other, actively and with full knowledge of the challenges ahead. The fire died to embers, then to darkness. Outside, an owl called, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote answered. The night sounds of the desert continued their eternal conversation, indifferent to human struggles and triumphs. But in that wiki-up, two people who'd forgotten how to hope had found it again in each other's arms. It wasn't a solution to all their problems. The world would still be harsh and divided come morning. But it was a beginning, a foundation on which to build whatever came next. As sleep finally claimed him, Caleb's last coherent thought was of the strange journey that had brought him here. His last dollar, spent on what most would call foolishness, had purchased something beyond price: a partner, a purpose, and the possibility of a future neither of them had dared imagine alone. The desert wind sang through the camp, and somewhere in its voice was the echo of an ancient truth that love, like freedom, couldn't be bought or sold or taken. It could only be chosen, over and over, in the face of everything that stood against it. Tomorrow would bring its own trials, but tonight they had chosen each other, and that was enough, more than enough. It was everything. The dawn came blood red over the mountains, painting the Apache camp in shades of warning. Caleb woke to the sound of horses, too many horses, approaching fast. He grabbed his Remington, rolling to his feet as shouts erupted throughout the camp. "Riders coming!" The sentry's cry in Apache needed no translation. Nayeli was already up, rifle in hand, her face grim. Through the wiki-up entrance, they could see warriors taking defensive positions. Women grabbed children, pulling them toward the hidden caves in the canyon walls. "How many?" Caleb asked Delche as she rushed past. 20, maybe more. They carry Pike's banner." Caleb's blood ran cold. Harlan Pike, here for his revenge. The slaver must have tracked them from the confrontation at Wolf's Howl, gathering men with promises of Apache scalp bounties and recaptured property. Taki appeared, war paint fresh on his face. "You brought this on us, White-Eye." "Then let me help fix it," Caleb replied. The chief's laugh was bitter. "You one man who knows Pike's tactics, who fought in wars bigger than this." Caleb checked his ammunition, precious little, but it would have to do. "You want to protect your people? Let me help." Before Taki could answer, Pike's voice boomed across the morning air. "Apache dogs, I know you're harboring stolen property. Send out the girl and the white trader, and we'll leave peaceful-like." "Peaceful?" Nayeli spat. "With 20 armed killers." Pike continued. "You got 1 hour to decide. After that, we're coming in, and anyone between us and what's ours is fair game. Women, children, makes no difference to me." The threat hung in the air like smoke from a coming fire. Around them, Caleb could see the Apache preparing too few warriors, too many vulnerable souls. Some of the men who'd grudgingly accepted him over the past days now looked at him with naked hatred. "This is what comes of trusting whites," the scar-faced warrior said. "No." Nayeli stepped forward. "This is what comes of standing against men like Pike. Would you have me be slave? Would you bow to such as him?" "Better to die fighting," Taki declared. He turned to Caleb. "You want to help take position with the women and children. Guard the caves." "With respect, that's not where I'm most useful." Caleb met the chief's eyes steadily. "I was a sharpshooter in the war. Give me high ground and clear lines. I can take out their leaders before—" Gunfire erupted, cutting him off. Pike's men, impatient or nervous, had opened up on the camp's perimeter. Apache rifles answered, but they were outgunned and outnumbered. "The caves!" Taki shouted. "Everyone to the caves!" The retreat was chaos, mothers running with babes, old men helping wounded warriors, the crack of rifles and whine of bullets filling the air. Caleb found himself beside a young mother struggling with 2 children. Without thinking, he scooped up the smallest, a girl no more than 4, and ran. The child weighed nothing, bird bones and fear. She clung to him as bullets sparked off rocks inches away. He made it to the cave mouth, past the girl to waiting hands, then turned back. Nayeli was pinned behind an overturned wagon, Pike's men advancing on her position. Caleb didn't remember making the choice to move one moment he was at the cave. The next he was running through open ground, rifle firing. His first shot took one of Pike's men in the shoulder. The second went wide, but it was enough to make them duck, giving Nayeli time to fall back. She sprinted toward him, and together they made for better cover. "Fool," she gasped. "You could have been killed." "So could you." They took position behind a cluster of boulders, picking their shots carefully. Around them, the battle raged. The Apache fought with desperate courage, but Pike's men had ammunition to waste and no qualms about destroying everything in their path. There, Nayeli pointed. Pike himself, directing the assault from behind solid cover. "If we take him, the others might break." Caleb finished. "Can you give me covering fire?" She nodded, understanding immediately. As a rifle cracked steadily, Caleb circled wide, using every scrap of cover. His ribs screamed where the old wound had reopened, blood seeping through his shirt, but he ignored it. He was almost in position when disaster struck. One of Pike's men had also been circling, trying to flank the Apache position. They saw each other at the same moment, both raising weapons. The man was younger, faster. His shot came first, catching Caleb high in the chest, spinning him around. The Remington flew from his hand as he fell, the world tilting sideways. Through the ringing in his ears, he heard Nayeli scream his name, saw her break cover, running toward him with no thought for her own safety, saw Pike's men turning their guns on her. "No!" Caleb forced himself to move. Crawling toward his fallen weapon, his chest was on fire, breathing came in wet gasps, but he reached the Remington, raised it with shaking hands. The shot was impossible 50 yards, wounded, vision blurring. But he'd made impossible shots before, for Thomas in that cornfield, for Isaiah who he'd failed to save, for all the ghosts who whispered that here. Now, he could make a different choice. The Remington bucked, Harlan Pike's head snapped back, and the slaver crumpled like a puppet with cut strings. For a moment, the battlefield froze. Then Pike's men, seeing their leader fall, began to waver. Some kept fighting, but others pulled back, suddenly aware they were fighting for a dead man's grudge. "Push them!" Taki's voice rose above the chaos. "Drive them out!" The Apache pressed their advantage, and within minutes, Pike's remaining men were in full retreat, leaving their dead and wounded behind. Caleb tried to sit up, failed. Then Nayeli was there, her hands on his chest, pressing something against the wound. "Don't you die!" she said fiercely. "Don't you dare die now!" "Not planning on it," he managed, tasting copper. Around them, the Apache were emerging from cover, checking the wounded, securing weapons from the fallen. Someone was crying grief or relief or both. The little girl he'd carried appeared at the edge of his vision, clutching her mother's hand, staring at him with wide eyes. "The white man," someone said in accented English. "He saved Little Fawn." "He killed Pike," another added. Taki appeared, kneeling beside them. His war paint was smeared, and there was blood on his hands, not his own. "You fought for us," the chief said quietly. "Bled for us. This changes things." "Just did what was right," Caleb gasped. "No." Taki's voice was firm. "You did more. You stood between our children and death. This makes you different from other whites. This makes you—" "One of us," Del Shay finished, appearing with medical supplies if you live. The next hours passed in a haze of pain and fevered dreams. Caleb was vaguely aware of being moved, of Nayeli's voice alternating between Apache prayers and English curses. He felt the burn of traditional medicines, the cool relief of water on his lips. When he finally surfaced fully, the sun was setting. He lay in a wickiup, not Delshay's, but one that smelled of sage and Nayeli's presence. She sat beside him, holding his hand, her face drawn with exhaustion. "How bad?" he asked. "Bad enough." Her voice was rough. "Bullet passed through, missed the lung. You lost much blood, but the medicine woman says you are too stubborn to die." "Sounds about right." He squeezed her hand weakly. "The camp." "Safe. We lost 3 warriors, but the children—" Her voice broke slightly. "All the children live, thanks to you." "Not just me. Everyone fought." "But you fought for us, not just with us. The people see the difference." She leaned down, pressing her forehead to his. "I thought I lost you when I saw you fall." "Take more than Harlan Pike to get rid of me," he said, trying for lightness. She pulled back, and he saw tears on her cheeks. "Do not joke. Not about this." "I'm sorry." He reached up, wiping away a tear with his thumb. "I'm here. I'm staying." A shadow fell across the entrance. Taki entered, followed by several other Apache leaders. The chief carried something wrapped in deerskin. "Caleb Thorne," Taki said formally. "You came to us as stranger, maybe enemy. Today you proved yourself warrior, protector. The council has decided—" He unwrapped the bundle, revealing a war shirt decorated with beadwork and quills. Simple but beautiful. It spoke of belonging. "You are welcomed as brother." Taki continued. "Not white man living with Apache, but true member of the Hidden Ashes band. Your children will be our children. Your fight, our fight." Caleb felt his throat tighten. I'm honored, but I didn't do it for reward." "We know." Taki's stern face softened slightly. "That is why it is given. Tomorrow, when you are stronger, there will be ceremony. But know this, you have home here now. Both of you." After they left, Nayeli helped him sit up enough to drink some broth. The war shirt lay beside them. Tangible proof of acceptance neither had dared hope for. "Your father was right," Caleb said quietly. "About change, about finding new ways forward."
"He would have liked you," she replied. "Would have seen what I see." "And what's that?"
She smiled, the expression transforming her face. "A man who spent his last dollar on freedom and gained a world. A fool who became family." Outside, the camp was settling for the night, but there were differences: children playing freely instead of hiding, voices raised in celebration rather than fear. They had survived, and in surviving, had grown stronger. Caleb closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the day settling into his bones. He'd finally stood his ground, finally chosen to protect instead of run. The ghosts of Antietam, of Isaiah, of all his failures, they were still there, but quieter now, perhaps satisfied that when the moment came, he'd made a different choice. Tomorrow there would be ceremony, acceptance, the beginning of a new life. But tonight, holding Nayeli's hand while she sang soft Apache lullabies, Caleb thought he understood what freedom truly meant, not just the absence of chains, but the presence of choice. The choice to stand, to fight, to protect, to belong. He'd spent his last dollar in a dusty saloon, and it had led him here wounded but whole, accepted by people who had every reason to reject him, loved by a woman who'd taught him that freedom and love were 2 names for the same precious thing. As sleep claimed him, he smiled. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but he would face them not alone, but as part of something larger, a family forged in fire, bound by choice, and stronger than any force that might stand against them. The morning sun painted the desert in shades of gold and copper as Caleb adjusted the leather straps of his pack. 6 months had passed since the battle with Pike's men. 6 months of healing and building. Now, standing at the edge of what would become their trading post, he could hardly believe how far they'd come. "Here," Nayeli said, handing him another support beam. "Last one for the east wall." Together, they raised the beam into place. The structure was simple but solid, built where 2 trails crossed, a natural stopping point for travelers of all kinds. They'd chosen the location carefully, with Taki's blessing and the band's help. Close enough to the Hidden Ashes camp for protection and community. Far enough to avoid bringing unwanted attention to the Apache. "Never thought I'd be building again," Caleb admitted, hammering the beam secure. "Spent so many years tearing things down. Different kind of war now," Nayeli replied, stepping back to survey their work. "War to build bridges instead of burn them." The trading post was more than just a business. It was a statement, a place where Apache and white settlers could meet on neutral ground. Trade fairly, share water and shade. They'd already had their first customers, a family of homesteaders desperate for supplies. Suspicious at first, but leaving with full bellies and directions to good land that wouldn't infringe on Apache territory. "Letter came with a supply wagon," Nayeli said, producing an envelope from her pocket. "From Fort Buchanan." Caleb's stomach tightened as he opened it, but the contents surprised him. Not a threat or summons, but a carefully worded note from a Captain Morrison, expressing interest in establishing peaceful commercial relationships with local inhabitants. "They want to buy from us," Caleb said slowly. "Grain, leather goods, even Apache crafts for the eastern markets." "Times changing," Nayeli observed, "not all for good, but some learning that peace brings more profit than war." A dust cloud on the horizon announced visitors. Caleb reached for his rifle. Old habits died hard but relaxed when he recognized Delshay's grandson. Kuruk, riding escort for a small group of Apache women bringing goods to trade. "The baskets are beautiful," one of the women, Ixta, said as she unpacked her wares. "My grandmother's patterns. They will fetch good price from white women who want pretty things." "We'll make sure you get fair value," Nayeli promised. "No cheating here." As the women arranged their goods in the small display area they'd built, Caleb found himself watching Nayeli work. She moved with easy confidence now, no longer caught between 2 worlds, but building a bridge across them. Her hair was braided in the Apache style, but she wore a practical dress that allowed for riding and work. On her belt, she still carried the knife he'd given her that first day. "You're staring," she said without turning around. "Just thinking." Dangerous habit. But she was smiling as she came to stand beside him. "What thoughts?" "About how that last dollar turned out to be the best investment I ever made." She laughed, the sound bright as water in the desert. "Investment you had no plan, just foolish impulse." "Maybe, but look what it bought." He gestured at the trading post, the women arranging their crafts, the sense of purpose that filled the space. A future, a family, a chance to do something that matters. "You always mattered," she said softly. "Just took you time to see it." A shout from the trail drew their attention. Kuruk was waving, pointing at an approaching rider. Caleb squinted against the sun, then felt his heart skip. The rider was young, maybe 16, with skin dark as coffee and eyes that held too much pain for his years. "Isaiah!" The name escaped before Caleb could stop it. No, impossible. Isaiah was dead, had died in his arms at Stone's River. But the resemblance... The boy reined in, studying the trading post with wary interest. "This the place that trades fair with all folk?" he asked. "It is," Nayeli answered when Caleb remained speechless. "You need supplies." "Need work," the boy replied. "And maybe some answers. My mama told me about a white soldier tried to save her boy in the war. Said he'd be the kind to run a place like this." Caleb found his voice. "What was your mother's name?" "Ruth Washington. Her boy was called Isaiah."
The ground seemed to shift under Caleb's feet. I knew Isaiah. Held him when he... How did she know to look for me?
The boy he introduced himself as Samuel dismounted. Letter came last year from some officer felt guilty. Wanted to clear his conscience before he died. Told about the white sergeant who tried to protect contraband boys, who held Isaiah at the end. Mama, she never forgot that kindness. When she heard about a trading post up here where Apache and whites worked together, run by an old soldier. He shrugged. She said I should find you. Said you'd understand about carrying guilt that ain't yours to carry.
Caleb sat down heavily on a crate, overwhelmed. All these years, he'd carried Isaiah's death like a stone in his chest. To know the boy's mother remembered not his failure, but his attempt at kindness. Your mother, he managed. Is she,
alive, free, working as a seamstress in Tucson. She wanted me to tell you. Samuel paused, pulling out a worn piece of paper. She wrote it down, said I had to get it right. Thank you for being with my boy at the end. Thank you for trying. The world needs more men who try.
Nayeli's hand found Caleb's shoulder, grounding him as emotions threatened to overwhelm. Here was absolution he'd never thought to find, delivered by another young man seeking his own path.
You need work, Caleb asked, voice rough. We could use help. The post is growing.
Samuel's face lit up. I'm good with horses. Can read and cipher, too. Mama made sure of that. Then you're hired.
Caleb stood, extending his hand. Fair wages, food and shelter included. And Samuel, your mama was right. The world does need more people who try. That's what we're building here.
As they shook hands, Caleb felt something shift inside him, like a bone finally setting after being broken too long. The guilt wasn't gone, it would never fully leave, but it had transformed into something else. Purpose. Drive to create the kind of world where boys like Isaiah and Samuel could thrive. The day continued, full of small victories and steady work. Customers came and went, Apache and Mexican, white settler and freed slave. Each transaction built trust, penny by penny, word by word. When disputes arose, Caleb and Nayeli mediated with hard-won wisdom. When children grew cranky in the heat, there was always cool water and sometimes, if their parents traded well, a piece of honey candy from the jar Nayeli kept hidden. As the sun began its descent, painting the desert in familiar shades of red and gold, Caleb found himself on the small rise behind the trading post. The view stretched for miles, desert and mountain, challenge and beauty intertwined. Nayeli joined him, as he'd known she would. No regrets, she asked.
None.
He pulled her close, breathing in the scent of sage and sunshine that always clung to her.
You. Only one.
She turned in his arms, meeting his eyes. That my father did not live to see this, to know that his vision of Apache and white working together was possible. He sees, Caleb said with quiet certainty. In every fair trade, every bridge built, every choice to trust instead of hate, 10 Crow's vision lives in what we build here. She kissed him then, soft and sure, a benediction and a promise. When they parted, both were smiling.
Come, she said. Samuel will think we've abandoned him, and Ixta wants to negotiate prices for next month's goods.
They walked back hand in hand, ready for whatever came next. The trading post stood solid against the desert wind, lanterns beginning to glow in the windows. It wasn't much by the standards of eastern cities, just adobe and timber, hope and stubbornness. But it was theirs, built on the foundation of a single silver dollar and the radical notion that people could choose their own paths. Inside, Samuel was learning Apache words from Karuk while Ixta laughed at their pronunciation. The women had sold most of their baskets, coins jingling in their pouches as they prepared to return to camp. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There were always those who profited from conflict, who would see the trading post as a threat to the old ways of hate and exploitation. But tonight, there was peace. There was purpose. There was the quiet satisfaction of lives intertwined by choice rather than force. Futures built on freedom rather than fear. Caleb paused in the doorway, watching Nayeli explain the next day's schedule to Samuel, her voice patient and warm. She glanced up, caught him looking, and smiled, that quick, bright expression that still made his heart skip. He'd spent his last dollar on what most would have called foolishness. Instead, he'd purchased redemption. Not the grand, dramatic kind sung about in ballads, but the quiet daily redemption of choosing to build rather than destroy, to trust rather than fear, to love rather than possess. As the stars emerged in the vast Arizona sky, Caleb thought about the letter he would write to Ruth Washington. He would tell her about the trading post, about Samuel's quick mind and willing hands. He would tell her that her son's memory lived on, not in guilt and regret, but in the bridges being built between peoples who'd been taught to hate each other. And he would tell her about Nayeli, the Apache woman who taught him that freedom wasn't something you could buy or sell or take. It was something you chose, every day, in small acts of courage and large leaps of faith. The desert wind sang its ancient songs, and somewhere in its voice, Caleb heard the echo of 10 Crows' wisdom, Isaiah's laughter, and the whisper of all the ghosts finally, peacefully, laying down their burdens. He stepped inside, joining his chosen family, ready to face whatever tomorrow might bring. The last dollar had been spent, but the investment continued to pay dividends in the currency that truly mattered: lives touched, bridges built, and the endless possibility of choosing love over fear, freedom over chains, hope over resignation. In the end, that was what freedom truly meant, not just the absence of bondage, but the presence of choice, and the courage to keep choosing, again and again, the harder path that led to light. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through the Old West. If you're listening to this story, I'd love to know where in the world you are. Drop a comment below, and let's share our thoughts about Caleb and Nayeli's journey together. If this tale touched your heart, please subscribe to Wild West Night for more stories of love, redemption, and the untamed frontier. Don't forget to like this video and hit that hype button to help more listeners discover these tales of the American West. Until next time, partners, keep riding toward the sunset and choosing your own trail.